In 1973, the wealthiest woman in America lay on her deathbed with a final, strange request. She wasn't leaving her crown jewel, a 128-room, 62,000-square-foot palace, to her children. Instead, she gave it to the one entity she believed was grand enough to handle it, the United States government. But within 10 years, the government would do the unthinkable. They would try to give it back. And when the family refused, this $100 million gift was nearly bulldozed into the sand. Why would an heiress to one of the world's largest fortunes give away her home to the taxman? Was it an act of ultimate patriotism, or a desperate attempt to stop her legacy from being sold off piece by piece? Today, we dive into the old money tragedy of Marjorie Merriweather Post and the secret reason why Mar-a-Lago was almost erased from history. The genesis of a dynasty. To understand why Marjorie gave the house away, you have to understand where the money came from. This isn't new money tech wealth. This is the bedrock of the American breakfast. In the late 1800s, C.W. Post was a man struggling with his health and his finances, but he had a vision, a coffee substitute called Postum. It turned into a cereal empire, Post Cereals. By the time Marjorie was 27, her father was gone and she was the sole heir to a fortune that in today's money would make her a multi-billionaire instantly. Marjorie didn't just spend the money, she managed it. She was a titan of industry at a time when women weren't even allowed to vote in some states. She spearheaded the acquisition of Jell-O, Maxwell House, and Birds Eye Frozen Foods, forming the conglomerate General Foods. But with that kind of wealth comes a specific old money burden, the need for a stage. In 1924, Marjorie decided she needed a winter home, not a beach house, but a fortress of culture. She chose a 17-acre strip of coral between the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Worth. She named it Mar-a-Lago, Spanish for sea to lake. She spent $7 million in 1920s dollars. To put that in perspective, that's over $120 million today, just for construction. She imported 36,000 antique Spanish tiles from the 15th century. She brought in stone from Italy. She hired the same designer who built the sets for the Ziegfeld Follies to do the interiors. This wasn't a home, it was a monument to the Gilded Age. But monuments have a way of becoming anchors. The Golden Age of the Winter White House. For 40 years, Mar-a-Lago was the center of the universe. If you were a duke, a president, or a Hollywood icon, you eventually ended up at Marjorie's dinner table. Marjorie ran the house like a military operation. She had a staff of over 70 people. Every guest was treated to their own suite, their own butler, and movies screened every night in the private theater. She even brought the entire Ringling Brothers circus to the front lawn once just to entertain her guests. But Marjorie was obsessed with a specific idea. She saw the British royals with their country estates and the French with their chateaux. She looked at America and saw a lack of grandeur for its leaders. She began to refer to Mar-a-Lago as the Winter White House. She wanted the President of the United States to have a place that could rival the palaces of Europe when hosting foreign kings and queens. This is the old money mindset. It's not enough to own the world, you must curate it for history. As the 1960s rolled in, the world was changing. The tax codes were shifting. The massive estates of the Gilded Age were being torn down to make way for condos. Marjorie's friends were selling their mansions. She realized that when she died, her 3 daughters, including the famous actress Dina Merrill, would likely sell the house. And if they sold it, the 17 acres of prime Palm Beach real estate would be subdivided. Her masterpiece would be demolished. She needed a protector. She needed the U.S. government. The Gift and the Rejection. In 1972, Marjorie finally convinced the National Park Service to accept Mar-a-Lago as a National Historic Site. She left a $200,000 annual maintenance fund, an astronomical amount for the time, along with the deed. She died in 1973, believing her legacy was safe. The government now owned the most expensive home in American history. But there was a problem, a massive $1 million a year problem. That $200,000 trust fund, it barely covered the water bill and the gardening. The U.S. government quickly realized they had inherited a white elephant. President Richard Nixon visited once. He liked it, but he already had a Florida White House in Key Biscayne that was easier to secure. Then came Jimmy Carter. In the middle of an energy crisis and an economic downturn, the image of the president lounging in a 128-room gold-plated mansion in Palm Beach was a political nightmare. Carter never even set foot in the house. The government tried to turn it into a diplomatic retreat, but the cost of security was too high. The house sat empty. The salt air began to eat at the 15th century tiles. The gold leaf began to peel. By 1980, the government decided they didn't want it. They passed an act of Congress to give it back to the Post Foundation.
The near destruction. Marjorie's daughters didn't want the house either. It was costing the foundation millions just to keep the lights on. They put it on the market for $20 million. No one bought it. Palm Beach socialites watched in horror as the Queen of Palm Beach saw her palace fall into disrepair. The Post Foundation reached a point of desperation. They applied for a permit to demolish the house and divide the 17 acres into small residential lots. Imagine it, one of the most significant pieces of American architecture, almost turned into a suburban cul-de-sac. This is where the old money story ends and the new money era begins. Enter a young real estate mogul from New York named Donald Trump. He offered $5 million for the property. The Post Foundation laughed at him. But Trump did something very old money in its ruthlessness, but new money in its execution. He bought the strip of land directly between Mar-a-Lago and the ocean. He then threatened to build a hideous, giant building that would block Mar-a-Lago's view of the sea forever. Suddenly, the value of the mansion plummeted. No one wants a palace with a view of a concrete wall. In 1985, Trump bought the entire estate, the house, the land, and the furniture, for less than $10 million, a fraction of what it cost Marjorie to build it.
The Legacy Reborn. Marjorie Merriweather Post wanted Mar-a-Lago to be the winter White House. She wanted it to be a place where the world's leaders met under gold ceilings. She failed to give it to the government, but in a strange twist of fate, the house found its way back to the presidency anyway. Whether you view its current state as a preservation of her dream or a departure from it, the walls still stand. The old money obsession with legacy is a double-edged sword. Marjorie gave the house to the government because she didn't trust people to value her art. She thought the state would be the ultimate curator. She was wrong. The state cares about budgets. Only individuals care about ego. Mar-a-Lago stands today not because of a government decree, but because of a series of financial gambles and a refusal to let a white elephant die. It remains a 17-acre island of the 1920s, floating in the 21st century. A reminder that even the greatest fortunes in the world can't always buy immortality, but they can certainly buy a lot of gold leaf.
The outro is a story of Mar-a-Lago isn't just a story about a house. It's a story about the transition of American power, from the serial dynasties of the Gilded Age to the media-driven wealth of today. Marjorie Merriweather Post was the last of her kind, a woman who built a palace for a country that wasn't quite sure it wanted one.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of old money and the architecture of power, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We explore the dynasties that built the modern world and the secrets they left behind in their mansions.